the best ways to start, I think, is a little bit of an elevator pitch, especially because I guess hearing from you, you've won an elevator pitch competitions in the past as well. So I hope I'm not putting you too much on the spot, but for those who aren't familiar with the science, could you introduce us to Astek?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, my grandfather had a UTI, and it took doctors 4 days to tell him what antibiotic he should be taking. In the meantime, they tried 3 different ones, and he was in pain, he was delirious, he ended up falling, and I watched him go from a young 87-year-old to a much, much older one within a couple of days. And that's why we started Astek Diagnostics. Our technology can determine antibiotic sensitivity in 1 hour, which means my grandfather could have taken the right antibiotic right away, and that would have prevented all the complications that he faced. We are 3 years old. We already have a working alpha prototype. We expect to be in the market within a year and a half. Yeah, so that's the short of it.
Yeah, that's really good. I can really tell you've obviously put in a lot of thought into the sections of that elevator pitch as well, and it's very simple to understand. I think antibiotics and the story you have about your grandfather as well is very strong in having that. Perfect.
You could tell I do this a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've done it thousands of times.
Yeah.
Gotcha. One thing that when I was doing some research is, as a medical device startup, you have to face the obvious hurdles of FDA approval, regulation, and distribution. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually seems like one of the biggest hurdles as well, from my mind, is that you're actually B2B to C, meaning you actually have to understand selling to doctors and physicians, but you also have to understand the end patient as well. Was that difficult for you to hear from both customers and build, I guess, for both?
I mean, it's my job as the CEO to speak to as many customers as possible. Of course, when I tell you my customer is, urology practices, right? Like urologists who lost, PCR, or medium-sized urology practices that lost PCR. So if anyone's advertising PCR on their website, chances are they lost it. They lost reimbursement for it, so they need something to come into the picture. Now, I don't really do much talking to people that had a UTI, simply because pretty much every person had a UTI at some point, and their grandparents dealt with a UTI or something like that, right? So this was not something I focused on, like the C, but business to business. Yeah, that's what we did. I talked to hundreds of urologists, hundreds of hospital people, hundreds of internal medicine, like you name it. Anyone who comes in contact with our product, we've talked to them.
Yeah. How do you go about, I guess, reaching out to hundreds of urologists? Like, did you have a specific strategy, or is it just something you've done over time that you've gotten used to?
I mean, you have to show why you want to talk to them. You just send them an email, and you do that. I've had tricks to do that, like where these people hang out, right? Offer to buy their coffee while they're waiting, right? You just have a nice conversation. If they like what you're building, you have another conversation. I can tell you, we were talking to nurses, and the trick that I used, I went to the Wendy's next to the hospital. They were all there. So you share, contact, and you talk to them.
Amazing. And do you find it hard to balance, I guess, speaking to your customers and then, of course, focusing on building as well?
I mean, I have a team. We're 7, so I don't really build per se. Early days, yes, because I'm pretty much I'm a solo founder, so I had to balance between the two. But in the end, you're selling to a customer. If you're building something they don't want, you have no, your technology doesn't matter at that point.
Absolutely. And and speaking about that point, I read that earlier in your life you actually spent some time building something to detect cholera in water, which didn't actually turn out to be as useful as you hoped, as there was something else already in the market. Did that actually shape the experience you have about building Astek in the startup right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so prior to me coming to the US, I was a refugee, and cholera was a huge issue for refugees. So that's when I came here, and I thought, like, hey, I need to find a professor who's doing some cholera research, or like some detection of bacteria. So I knew the problem, at least, But what I did not realize was things changed very quickly. And there's a company that actually also in Baltimore, so crazy that happened to be here. They started providing live straws, and these straws have filters in them. So just use the straw instead of detect it, right? So that's an easier solution to the problem. And then, I kind of abandoned that project. And then when I learned about sepsis, kind of picked it back up. And then, my grandfather, but, I was still a student at that point. And then when my grandfather got sick, like a couple months before I graduated, I was like, yeah, we need to start a company and actually not get an academia job like I had thought I wanted to do.
Got you. Very, very interesting about how that shapes that one thing. You might have already answered this question to some point, but I'm still interested in, I guess, hearing about it as well. Because you said in the early days you were very hands-on building, and I understand that. I think you and your co-founder originally built the prototype in a basement, but you said that you've kind of moved away from that a little bit. But typically, as a founder, you have to wear many hats. And what does your schedule look like right now? Do you have struggle to find work-life balance, or just to juggle many things? Have you passed a lot of that off to your team as well?
I mean, I do support. I invented technology. I understand it very well. So we hired a firm that does R&D, like they build the products for us, right? So unless something is needed, unless something is going wrong, I have a product manager that takes care of all of that. But it's what 11:30 almost. This is my fourth meeting today, and 7:15 I had a couple questions on from an investor that I had to answer, and I met with the hospital person today, and it's impossible to build. I mean, you cannot rely on me having the time to actually build anything these days because I have to prioritize bringing in the money.
It's one of the most highest ROI tasks that a founder goes through. But it sounds like you've made a very smooth transition.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest things I think most founders face is actually hiring the right talent. Did you have how did you know that you had to hire a product manager or this, or how did you prioritize your next hires?
I mean, our first hire was a engineer, right? Because I knew I need to spend more time fundraising. So of course, at that point, this technology was my baby, so it was really hard for me to let it go. But over time, her name is Courtney. Courtney kind of gained my trust, and I was like, yeah, it's in good hands. I can take a step back, and then, but I still did the sciencey stuff. So the data, looking at the data, interpreting data, tweaking the, some stuff in the device. But then I hired Chris. Chris is a much better scientist than I will ever be, and Chris took over. But I still had to sometimes go to the lab and do some testing. So we hired Izzy and Aisha, and now they do that. But then, I started, talking to customers a lot, and we realized that, it takes much longer to do follow-ups and schedule meetings than it takes. That means my outreach is going to slow down. So we hired Engel. Engel does the outreach, he does the follow-ups, and he's a very smart businessman as well. So just better. And what could you get help with? I would say
You've just solved like one bottleneck at a time. You're focusing on the problem ahead of you and worrying about, I guess, the time commitment that you have to do that. I really hear you on, I guess, like Astek's your baby, and it was really hard to pass off. One thing I believe that is everyone on your team has a piece of your company, and that's really amazing because that can be very hard for some founders to do. Can you walk me through, I guess, the decision process? Did it help with finding the right talent initially?
Dude, I just reach out to people. For lack of a better term, I slide in their DM.
Yeah.
I go to LinkedIn, be like, hey, you seem like someone I want to work with. Would you like to join Astek? No job postings, really. Just me looking for people. And of course, people don't respond sometimes, but others respond. And that's how we got Courtney. That's how we got Aisha, Izzy, everyone. I just slide in their DM.
I love it. It seems like you are very proactive in terms of this sort of outreach, which is not something that's everyone is, I guess, a natural at doing. And I believe at Y-Combinator, when you first joined Y-Combinator as well, you reached out to previous alumni for tips and like asked them how they got into Y-Combinator, specifically around, I believe they said, focusing on the application. What exactly did you have to focus on in order to get in?
Dude, I did not talk to any alumni. It took me like 25 minutes to write the application. People overthink that stuff. You know your customer, you know what you're building. It's like 10 questions. Just write what you know. I use first person. I did not. Nothing was formal. No one proofread it. My video was with my son playing in the background, and it worked out. I mean, yeah, you know your customer. Just tell them who your customer is. That's what they care about.
Amazing. Any tips, I guess, for people wanting to go in, or are you just saying that don't worry too much about the application, just be yourself and know what you do?
Yeah, know who you're building for. So know what you're like. You don't even have to know what you're building yet. Just tell them what you're thinking. I mean, they accept ideas.
I'm not sure if you cut off.
If we had some data. Yeah, I was saying that, like even with an idea, right? As long as you know your customer, that's what they want to know, that you know your customer. In our case, it's hard tech, right? So they asked for some data to show that this works. We had a meeting, and then we had a follow-up meeting with the scientists just to help with their due diligence. But generally, just your customer, just tell them about your customer. Tell them the special insight that you have gained.
Right, got you, perfect. So I think that's definitely a really good tip, and I think a lot of people would appreciate that. I'd love to, of course, you've come out of Y-Combinator, and of course they gave you a bit of money for that. I'd love to talk about your raise recently as well. You told me that you went through over 130 investor meetings in order to secure funding, and as part of that process, as far as you understand, rejections are very normal when fundraising, but can be very hard to face. I'd be curious if you have any, I guess, insight on rejections, and if you have any tips on handling that.
Do not schedule meetings late, because that you might not be able to sleep. So I learned that the hard way. But in all seriousness, the first 10 no's hurt, because these investors tell you that they invest in people. So when they say no, it's like, you don't like me. But it gets easier. We laugh about it. Honestly, people that say no make my life easier, because I don't have to chase them. Investors will ghost you. Just keep going after them. Remember that people invest in a line and not at a time point. So make sure you keep them informed of what you're building. Make them informed with your progress, and chances are at some point they will invest because they know your progress.
I love that. Maybe I'll dig into that bit. You said investors invest in a line and not in a point. And I think in this current environment, especially, I think you're spot on there. Was there a series of events where you came to that realization that they're not investing in a point, or is that something that you've always known?
No, I mean, I don't have getting funding, but what I ended up doing is I reached out to all the people that had passed before YC and say, hey, we just went through YC, we just did this, we did that, and that worked. Because before YC, I had already met with many investors as well.
How much time do you dedicate to networking with investors in general?
Like networking as go to events?
Either or, like going to events, talking to them, updating them, like you said, because it sounds like you are nurturing a relationship with all these investors. Yeah. How do you dedicate to that, or how do you balance it, really?
So we have the investor outreach, we have an investor funnel, we have all of that stuff, right? So, and once a month, I guess. Well, actually, no, once a quarter, when I send the investor update for the existing investors, I create a second version for the people who passed, and I just send that. I have the lists already put together, and it really does not take much time, maybe like half hour every quarter to update these guys. But as far as networking, dude, these events, 99.9% of these events are a waste of time. So you go there, it's the same faces every time, and really just a bunch of founders complaining that they don't have money. But every now and then you go to a good event. like for example, I think we went to Johnson Johnson Investor Day. We were invited, and some guy there just committed on the spot. We just got selected into MedTech Innovator 2024 cohort. I mean, I was not going to pass on that event. It's amazing how good, like good the summit was, and it's not for fundraising. It's just for general, new community and all that.
Yeah, I hear you on the fact that like a lot of startups complain about not having enough money, or they're going to these events, like of course looking for funding as well. I work with startups from all over the world, and I often hear one of the common complaints is that investors are not interested in their specific region. Mustafa, of course, you are located in Baltimore, which isn't necessarily a hotspot for VCs. Do you have to face this problem, and do you have any tips on, I guess, facing that problem?
I wish I had tips, man. We had an organization here called Tetco. They're really good with founders. And always my goal was like, hey, well, as long as I have something to show, some data, I could, money comes. And then very, very slowly, we kind of started here and started like expanding. Our investor right now is from Dallas. YC helped a lot. Because one of the people that we met there, he invested 5,000, but he ended up making 2 introductions. One of them worked out. So you just like, the idea is how can you get the first 10 investors? And from there, they will introduce you to all kinds of people. And I think that's very valuable. And ask for advice. Don't like just go say, hey, I want money. Just say, hey, can I get your, pick your brain, or something like that.
Because investors are also likely very people who are very successful as well, who are able to provide a lot of resources and knowledge as well. And you've seen that with your group of investors, I assume.
I think it depends on the investors, case by case. I mean, like a junior associate with a VC, they can't provide you anything, right? But a general partner who's been there, who's seen 100 startups or 1,000 startups, yeah, they know what they're doing. Some angel investors who exited their startups, right? I mean, these guys are the best because they have a little bit extra time. They're willing to actually get their hands dirty with you. Yeah, so I'm very good at bothering my existing investors, asking them for advice, and then return for nothing.
In saying that, when you were, I don't know if picking investors is the right word here, but do you vet your investors to see who's able to help you the best, and how do you go through that vetting process?
Not in this climate, unfortunately. I know, like, because you're building a medical device, right? Like if I was profitable, yeah, I probably would be very picky with my investors. But right now, like the pessimism out there is so crazy that like if someone's trying to invest, just don't give them a board seat, right? Like, what is the worst that can happen? Again, I don't know. All my investors are very nice. But like it's hard to be picky with medical devices in this climate. That's all I want to tell you.
Absolutely. You've picked of course, very sophisticated niche, and that's probably something to talk about. Like you said, you've gone from being a refugee to being in academia, and then a startup founder right after graduation. And for anyone, that's a hard transition. But you've also picked, like I said, a very regulated niche. Have you felt lost in knowing what to do at any point, and how did you manage that?
The problem is underestimating what it takes. Like if you look at my first slide deck from 2021, dude, I told him 6 months I'm in the market. Just give me $1 million. Now it's so much more money later. So much time has passed, and like no, it's really hard because you're building for a patient, and they will use the data that you provide to save a life, which is really not easy apparently.
Yeah, of course. And did that bite you back when you said, hey, 6 months I'll be in the market, and then these investors know a little bit more than you, and they kind of just say like immediately reject you? Or like, how did that work? How did you learn that it was more?
I'm pretty sure someone rejected me for my over optimism, but people sometimes call you out. So it's like, hey, you clearly don't know what you're doing, but I like you, so I'll invest a little bit of money. But I would like to help you with these projections. You're not going to sell 100 million worth of kits in 2021. So it's interesting. I learned a lot. Got many rejections that I learned from. Got some rejections that I did not learn from, it's just,
I think it's almost necessary to be overly optimistic as founders, because sometimes, as what I hear, is if you knew how hard it was going to be, you might not have started at all, right? So you need to almost really change your perspective on things.
100%, man. If someone had told me that there's going to be a recession in 2022 when my startup is a year old, I would probably be like, you know what? Let me go to academia, get a cushy job. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
You bring up a good point, and I think something a lot of founders face a problem with, especially if they started in a career path originally. As someone with a very strong academic background as yourself, I'm sure you had some interesting job prospects that you were thinking about and you turned away from in order to pursue this startup. Was there a time where you considered a more traditional career path?
Yeah, I mean, I had a job. I had a job offer. I had a job offer to teach engineering at a university, and but I no, I didn't, like, this was more important for me to fix. Like, this issue is huge, and also something that people don't talk about, I guess, when you start a company, is like all the smart people that you interact with. Your circle changes, and I love all the people that are like hang out with, but they're like much smarter than me, and you just listen the whole time. It's amazing.
You said nobody gets it except for founders. What do you mean when you say that?
Dude, it's lonely.
Hmm.
It's so lonely. Like, I can't tell you how, like, and I don't know. It's like, it's hard to explain because you get called stupid, but then you're in a terrible mood, but then some guy named Brandon wants to talk to you and you have to pretend to be charming, right? Like, dude, I'm serious. I'm serious. Like, you have to put like a face on 24/7, even if you have like the shittiest day. I think founders are very good at that as well. Like, yeah, I mean, being called stupid over and over again, dude, it gets to you, but then you get over it.
And I hear you. It's part of the reason why I reach out to founders such as yourself to, I guess, share that journey, because you're right. It is extremely lonely when you're kind of pursuing a mission by yourself. Initially, as well, when you're first starting out, it's going to be facing a lot of problems and rejection.
Like, let me tell you what happened. There's an investor named Alan, and with Alan, he lived on the West Coast, and he wanted to meet at 10 p.m. Eastern, and I said, sure, why not? Like, we could meet, and he brought in a couple of physicians with him to the meeting, and at that point, I think we had like $22,000 in the bank. I was not getting paid a penny. At 10 p.m., the physicians told me that this would never work, and I'm wasting my time, and the market is not penetrable, and all that stuff. Dude, it was so painful. It was very early on also in the journey. So right now, if it happens, I don't care. But you know how hard that was? You know how hard it was to go to sleep after that? It was just like, you have to be a founder to understand that pain.
Absolutely, and it's really amazing how you've picked that one big problem and you've focused on it for so long. Because in a similar sense as well, is we've all heard of shiny object syndrome. Especially among founders. Did you feel that as well, especially when you were faced with like with this investor Alan telling you it would never work? How do you pick this one big problem and go all in on it, and then not get distracted by something else?
I know my customers. As simple as that. I know if I can pull this off, ETI treatment will never be the same. I promise you that. I mean, we're very close. We just got 2 independent studies come out that's saying this works, and it's like over 95% accuracy, right? So, like, I know my customer. Some random dude who stumbled upon $50 million and was an angel investor, he's not going to tell me what to do and what not to do. Now, if 50 clinicians tell me what I'm doing will never work, will never be adopted, it's a different story.
That's absolutely amazing, and it's like I think that's something that's, I guess, a very prized sort of characteristic of in yourself as a founder, being able to focus and of course believe in that actual vision as well.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, talk to your customer. This is it. Really, like, when it comes down to like what a startup is, just like speak to your customer. That's it.
I think I read that you used the mom test for everyone in your company. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, the one test. Yeah, I encourage everyone in my company to read that book. It makes so much sense. Just learn about the problem. Do not prime people with the solution, because chances are your solution isn't at all for people to like. So just what I do is I do a three-step, so 3 interviews. First interview is just the problem. And then I create a hypothetical solution. So go back and validate the problem, that make sure I understood it properly. So that's the second meeting. Third meeting is start to sell. So if they're willing to sign on the dotted line saying, hey, if you get FDA clearance, I'll buy your device, that is the biggest, um, that is that's the biggest validation to your idea. And that's how we got about $30 million worth of contracts, even a year away from FDA clearance.
Sounds like you're super process oriented as well, and it's really helped you on your journey. And of course, I think to wrap up, I'd love to ask what's next for Astek. Are you going to be in hospital soon, or like what's the next plan?
So we're raising our Series A right now, and we're very close. We're raising 15. That should get us into the market, and once we're in the market, we have all these contracts that we have to fulfill. So revenue will come. Really, this is a lot of work, but I have a great team, so we'll be there. We'll get there soon.
Can't wait to see the goals you kick. Is there anything, I guess, that the audience, if anyone's listening at all, can do to help you?
I mean, any urologists who might be interested, I would love to talk to them. Any OBs, if investors are also part of your listeners, I would love to talk to them. And yeah, for all founders, just keep working hard.
Perfect. That's about everything. Thank you so much for your time, Mustafa.
All right, man. Thank you.